We put a fair amount of effort and energy into the big deal for you guys this year, and it actually proved very successful for us. So thanks for those of you that have engaged with that and have made it the success that it is. And it's on the back of the big deal that the business likes to see me talking to you guys in group sessions, because we can probably get a great deal more done when I'm standing in front of 9 of you than perhaps taking up your time when you're sat in your branches. Now, I know this is the start of a meeting and you'll be talking about a lot of numbers today. I just wanted to start quickly with a maths test, because everybody loves a bit of maths on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and I just want to know whether or not everybody gets in their head the difference between affordability and multiples. It's just a very quick 2 minutes, because I find it quite instructive to see whether everybody understands it, because this is one of the bigger challenges that I think that we've faced in our industry over the last few years since MMR came in. If you've got somebody that's earning £25,000 a year, and you're using a lender that's got a 4 times multiple, what will that lender lend that person? £100,000, bang on. That person's got a £50 a month loan commitment. How do you work out what impact that has on how much a lender will lend to?
Put it in the affordability calculator.
Good answer. That is exactly, and it's the only way you can do it. Now, I was a broker and had been a broker for 17 years when I stepped away and went into management within lending. The way that we used to do it, in the old world, where we talked about multiples, was you'd take that £50 and you'd analyse it, 600 quid. You'd take that £600, you'd deduct it from the annual salary, which meant the amount that you were using for the borrowing was now £24,400. Yep. And then you'd multiply that by the 4 times that the lender would use. So instead of the lender offering £100,000 to that client, that lender would only offer £97,600 to that client. So that £600 a year commitment reduced the amount that that borrower could borrow by £2,500, 2,400 quid. That's the impact that it had. Have you guys noticed that since MMR it has slightly greater impact than that? And have you ever thought about how and why the impact is greater than that, and how an affordability calculator works with an existing debt position? Because it might help sometimes, but I hear it every day, every week. Tell us what your multiple is. What's your biggest multiple? What's your multiple? We don't live or work in a multiples world anymore. It's a very, very different place. And it's worthwhile just doing a bit of mental arithmetic, and I have got all the answers here, so it won't be that mental, to understand the difference that MMR has made and that affordability makes to what does and doesn't work for a client. That same client, £25,000 a year, £600 a year in commitment on a loan. If you borrow us £100,000 on a currently available 2-year fixed rate, and I'll use one of ours, which is at the moment 1.64% fixed for 2 years, a £100,000 mortgage over 25 years would cost that client 412 quid. Yep. So if it costs 412 quid to borrow 100 grand, how much would it cost to borrow 10 grand?
£41.20.
Absolutely. If it costs £41.20 to borrow 10 grand, how much would it cost to borrow 1 grand? £4.12. Okay? If it costs £4.12 to borrow £1,000, then £4.12 worth of that guy's income supports £1,000 worth of borrow. So if you move £50 a month from that guy's monthly ability to borrow money, £4.12, divide your 50 by £4.12, multiply it back up by the 1,000, and you get £12,135. Now, I don't know if you've ever done that maths in your head in order to get a concept of what affordability truly means, but in the old world of multiples, £50 debt reduces lending by 2,400 quid. In the new world of affordability, that same debt reduces that applicant's ability to borrow by just over £12,000. It's a huge difference. And the work that you guys have to do...
Is that all based on the rate then? So if the rate was higher, then it would be a...
Different lenders will use different ways of coming up with that answer. What I'm trying to get is a concept of the difference, mathematically and arithmetically, between multiple, really simple, do it in your head, and affordability. And your answer was absolutely right. You can't do it in your head, because each lender does it in a slightly different way. And there are some lenders that if you say that that applicant is an employed person or a self-employed person, you'll get a different answer. Because the affordability calculator is manipulated in order to make certain people look better for that lender than others. It's used to do that. And the job that you guys are engaged in on a daily basis, and that I used to be engaged in on a daily basis, is all about trying to understand, when you're talking to a client, how you decide which is the right lender for you to go to. I'm here clearly to talk about platform, but this is a global idea. I tend to think back to the days when I was broking, that when you started a conversation with a client, you had a bank of lights on the wall behind you, and they were all lit when you started that conversation. And you ask questions, and you get further into that conversation with the client, and the lights start to go out. Because you know, oh, that lender won't do that, because the answer I got to that question means that lender won't do that, and the answer I got to this question means that lender won't do that. And you're turning lights out as you have that fact-find conversation. Till eventually you're left with probably 2 or 3 lights that are still lit. And you know that those are the 2 or 3 lenders that will probably lend to the client that you've got sitting in front of you, because it's your experience that gives you the ability to have that conversation. My job is to try and make sure that one of the lights that stays lit is platform. And I guess the challenge that we have, and all of us have as BDMs, regardless of which lender we work for, is how do we make sure that our light stays lit for the right reasons? And if those lights are staying lit, is that because those are the lenders that are absolutely the best lender for your client in those circumstances? Or are they just the ones that you know best? Because you've used them before, because you're familiar with them, because you're comfortable with them, because you feel confident that when you're putting your professional standing on the line with that client and you're saying, I recommend this lender, you know that lender's actually going to back you up and do what you've told that client that lender's going to do. So how do we as a lender make sure that we stay in a space where that works? Because I've done this for everyone I've done these presentations with countrywide and with Connells and all of the large estate agency groups where I do stand-up presentations. I look at the makeup of the team. Now in this team, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. And across that group of 10 people, do you think you all do hugely different business, that your individual business makeup is fundamentally different to the person sitting next to you? Or is it quite similar? Do you see similar clients because you work in similar agency offices? What's your general opinion on that? Yeah. So an office in Whirl is going to be much the same as an office in Chard, or an office in Yeovil, or an office in Wales, in terms of the sort of client that you talk to, in terms of the sort of lending that you're doing, in terms of the loan to values, whether they're first timers, whether they're second timers. Generally, over a year, you'd probably end up with a similar mix of people that you're talking to. Is that fair? Because across the board, of those 10 people who are in the room, I've had 9 cases for 1.3 million from the people sitting in this room. Yeah? I've also got 1, 2, 3 people that aren't registered with Platform, and I've got 3 people that are registered but haven't placed any business. And this is when we're all accepting the fact that the business is kind of the same. So that's my fault, because it's my responsibility to try and make sure that the lights stay lit. It's my responsibility to try and make sure that you understand what we do and we don't do. And if that isn't happening, the light doesn't stay lit. And if the light doesn't stay lit, we don't get a look in. So this isn't me having a go at you guys, this is me recognising the fact that if you're all doing kind of the same sort of business, why is there such a huge differential between the levels of engagement in some areas and the level of engagements in others? And is that simply because I haven't met all of you, most of you, but I haven't met all of you in an individual setup? Is it because there's a knowledge that comes from history of what Platform were, and that knowledge has never been superseded by a positive experience? Around the room, generally. Those of you that don't use us, is there a particular reason?
I don't usually. I'm probably one of the people that aren't registered, to be
Okay.
honest.
You are,
Jamie.
right? Yep.
No, that's a good way.
You're not?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I've obviously never met you,
No.
and so I know nothing about platform really.
Okay.
I'm quite used. Well, I've been here a year, but
Yep.
you start learning bits, don't you?
Yep. So that's unfamiliarity.
And I think
That's unfamiliarity. And that unfamiliarity isn't necessarily your fault.
no,
It is quite potentially mine, because we've never met. And therefore, if we come up with a great product and you see us sourcing and you think, actually, I don't really know about them, and if I were going to recommend this lender, I want to be really sure that they're going to look after my client, and I'm not sure because I don't know anything about them. So you move to the next one. And you can justify that within your compliance framework because you're unfamiliar with our service standards. You are more confident that this lender is the one you want to use. Or you do what I did when I was a broker, which you said, look, Mr. Client, I've got this product from Nationwide. It's about £20 a month more expensive, which over 2 years is about 200 quid. It's not massive. And I've got this lender. To be honest, I don't really know that much about them. They might be brilliant, but I've not used them. I'm confident that these guys will look after you. I'm not quite so confident about those. Who's your client going to buy? That's a perfectly valid technique to get the job done. But it means that our light goes out when perhaps, maybe, there was an opportunity for it to stay lit.